Welcome to Yakety Mac, guys. I appreciate you watching and I hope you enjoy today's video. So I'm doing something today that I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to put both of my boats on the water for a head-to-head comparison. My Pelican Bass Raider 10E and my Old Town Sportsman 106 Kayak. And guys, the reason for this video is because 2 years ago, I was trying to decide which one of these two vessels would be right for me. I ended up getting both about a year apart from one another. But I've learned some things over the course of time, and I posted a video last week in which I talked about their differences, and I got a little bit of pushback. Guys told me, hey, look, you need to be comparing apples to apples. Well, actually, the reason we compare things is so that we can point out their differences and not their similarities, and then make the most informed decision that we can from there. And that's why I'm making this video, is to help you make an informed decision. So guys, I'm going to set these two boats up as identical as I possibly can, and we're going to try to compare apples to apples the best that we can. We're going to check speed, stability, agility, fishability. We're going to talk about space. We're going to talk about convenience, and then you make up your mind for yourself. So we're going to get started in the kayak, guys. Let's get them wet. All right, guys, so I've pulled away from the dock. It is now time to deploy the rudder, and rudder is deployed. So I'm heading up. I got about a quarter of a mile to go up the Tennesseau River here. Let's go ahead and get a speed test out of the way since we got to cruise along anyway. So right now I am on setting 2 on my trolling motor. Old eyes suck, y'all. Let's see. I am doing just over 2 miles an hour, 2.09. So let's kick this thing on up to 5. Let's just see what it does full speed, going against the current upriver. 3.8 miles an hour. On setting 3 on the trolling motor, I'm getting 2.6 miles an hour. All right, guys, so while we're traveling along, let's talk about inventory. Let's talk about what I've got on board here on the boat, and we'll start with the bow and work our way back to the stern. So up here in the bow hatch, which is a waterproof hatch, I've got 4 3600 Plano boxes. I've got a anchor and rope, a little small 1.5 pound anchor and rope. I've got my rain suit, I've got a dry bag, and I have another small tackle bag with soft plastics in it. So I'm able to keep that up there in the hatch. Now, the hatch is accessible from the kayak. In fact, as we're moving along here, I can come up here, take the lid off of the hatch, and get in there and get what I need. Now, I would not necessarily call that super convenient, but it is accessible, and I don't have to get out of the kayak to access it or whatever. So I keep the things that I use very seldom or less seldom up in that hatch right there. Like, for instance, one of my Plano boxes is some crankbaits. I'm not big into crankbaits, so I keep it up there. But if I'm out on the water and I'm like, man, nothing's happening, what about a crankbait? Then, you know, at least I've got access to it. But I keep the things that I don't use all that often up there. So moving back this way now, obviously we have the trolling motor. I went with the motor today because I'm going to have to use the motor on the Bass Raider. And then so I've got it here in between my legs. It doesn't really take up a lot of room. If I had this situation to do all over again, I would have gone with a pontoon trolling motor mount here instead of this, just to alleviate some of the bulk that I've got going on here. But again, it does not interfere at all with my leg room. I've got 2 gear tracks here on the side. On this side over here, I've got pliers, I've got glasses, I've got my boomerang cutters, I've got my gator alarm on this side over here, and I've got these cutouts on the side of the kayak. So I'm able to store these things, and they got this rubber netting here in these cutouts, and they don't fall out. They don't get in my way. They're not dangling down at my feet or anything. I've got my battery meter here. I've got my fish grips stuck in here, and then right here beside me, I've got my depth finder, my Garmin Striker 4. Underneath the seat right here, I've got a 3700 series Plano box. It's got my favorite lures in it. It's the ones I use the most often, so I'm able to keep those right here in the built-in section of the seat. Right here to my right, I've got my morning cup of coffee into the built-in cup holder. This is my rudder launch. You saw me launch the rudder. Over here on the left, I've got my paddle. And then directly behind the seat, I've got a bag hanging here with a 20-ounce water canteen in it. It's a little cooler insulated sling bag. I will also try to put this on my Bass Raider seat. Again, trying to keep things apples to apples as much as possible. Directly behind the seat here, I've got my catch board. And then directly behind that, guys, I've got my tackle crate system, which I will take on the Bass Raider as well. I've got 5 rods with me today. Inside my tackle crate system, I have 7 3600 Plano boxes, plus another water canteen, some camera cases, and my trusty latrine. And then directly behind that, I've got my 100 amp hour lithium battery. I've got a flagpole with a light on it tucked into the side over here. And of course, I've got my net here in one of the flush mounted rod holders. So there's my inventory, guys. That is everything that I'm carrying on this 10.5 foot kayak. Okay, so we have made it to the honey hole. Let's hope, right? And so I always put the pole that I'm going to start off with right here in this first flush mounted rod holder. That way I can just reach around, grab it. I can easily then take off my lure cover, slide it here up under the seat with my 3700 box, and I'm ready to go. Well, look what we have here, fellas. I'm going to see if I can get this on camera. We've got ourselves a gator. That's not exactly what you want to see first thing in the morning. But there he goes. We'll keep an eye on that one. The good news is the gator is moving away from us. Bad news is we're moving towards the gator. I come in peace, my friend. I come in peace. All right, guys, so I'm going to do a stability test here in this kayak. Now, let me just preface this by saying that no kayak is going to be as stable as the Bass Raider. But if you're like, hey man, sometimes I like to stand and fish. I do not. So stability matters to me from a safety standpoint, but from a fishing standpoint, I could not care less. I do not stand to fish on the Bass Raider, and I do not stand to fish in this boat. In fact, I have never stood up in the kayak to actually make a cast. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to adjust the camera so it points upright so you guys can see me. And then I'm going to try to make a cast. All right, so hopefully you caught that right there. Very, very easy to stand up in. I've got my feet pretty wide apart. This will be my first cast ever standing up in a kayak. My aim was not good. Boy, I sure hope I don't get a fish. This just doesn't compare to the Bass Raider. Now look, I feel fine like this, right? I mean, I'm nervous, sure, because I can't swim. And I'd prefer not to be in the water today. But in all actuality, I do not feel like I'm going to go over any moment or anything like that. It doesn't feel like that way at all. I can sit down now. Which, by the way, probably can't see that the way I got the camera pointed, was very easy. So agility, the kayak is able to move, and if I take the rudder and use the rudder at the same time as the trolling motor, I'm just sitting here spinning in circles, guys. This is an advantage that a kayak will have, say, because you've got a steerable rudder. If you get one with a steerable rudder, or you add a steerable rudder, is I'm able to sit here and just do circles. So the agility of this kayak is absolutely fantastic. Now, I do not get this kind of agility when I have my pedal unit in, because I don't have the ability to turn my pedals and my rudder into the same direction like I do right now. So, but when you add the trolling motor, the agility is absolutely phenomenal. So guys, let's visit the space. That was something I got some pushback on in my last video, is that, hey, there's no way that you've got more space in a kayak. And I don't think what I did a good job of was talking about usable space, and to me, space also entails clutter. Because everything is so organized, there's kind of like, I know where everything is at, because everything has to have a home. For me, everything has to have a home. And the fact that I've got so many nooks and crannies built into this kayak to put everything in its home really reduces a lot of stress for me and makes me feel like, right now I am 5'11", and I have my seat only about halfway back on the track, and I cannot put my feet up against the front here where the rest, I can touch my toes on it, but I can't actually rest my feet up on it. So I have a ton of space. Even with my pedal unit in here, it sticks up about the same amount as this trolling motor. Now the pedals actually serve as a footrest, and it's got a little bit of a bigger footprint, but the pedal unit also has a dry hatch built into it, so I can throw things like a phone, I can throw keys, I can take my cameras off and throw those in there if it starts raining. So I've got that, and then of course I got my depth finder. I can turn it in a bunch of different directions. I can move it to closer to here. I can move it out closer to where it's in line with the thin gunnels here. I've got 23 inches of space in front of me. So this is a ton of space to me, and because I'm actually kind of sitting up above the boat in this water line, all of this is just completely open to me, and it feels great. I don't have anything in my peripheral vision. I cannot see right now. If I turn this way, I can see my net a little bit. If I turn this way, I can see the one rod that I've got here. But I'm not having to look at all this stuff behind me. So the space just feels phenomenal. I don't have things rolling around on the floor. I don't have things at my feet. You know, if I need to do anything, I can do it. And I don't have clutter kind of making me feel claustrophobic, I guess. Even though I would not describe myself as being claustrophobic, clutter definitely causes me stress. So from a fishability standpoint, I can cast off to my left, cast off to my right, and of course I can cast straight ahead. So now I am, let's say I've got my topwater lure on here now, and I'm like, you know what, this topwater bite is dead. I think I want to go Texas rig. Well, so the way I make that work here on the kayaks, I put my lure protector on here, my lure wrap. Put the rod here on my front facing rod holder. I reach, turn around here. Which one am I gonna go with? I think I'll go with this one here. So I pull it out, and then I simply put this rod back into the slot that I just vacated. Now, for whatever reason, I'm not real good about using my front-facing rod holder for this kind of stuff. I don't know why I always tend to tuck the rod in between my knees. On the Bass Raider, I've actually attached a couple of rod holders to the floor for that very purpose. And then I turn around and do the same thing on that. I don't know. So this is the kayak. We tested everything that I set out to test. Let's take all of this inventory off of here, put it onto the Bass Raider, and see how it fares. Okay, we are aboard the Bass Raider now. So let's get right to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is deploy the rudder, just like I did on my kayak. Now, truth be told, there are some docks there. I could have pulled this boat around to those docks and dropped the rudder before getting on board. The reason I did not do that is because many of the places I go, and some of the places you may go, you might have to beach the boat and climb into it just like you would a kayak. And so the way I've got my rudder now is I'm going to deploy it afterwards, just like if I was somewhere where I had to beach it, and just kind of show you how that gets a little bit problematic with my rod storage and everything here behind me. I'm going to have to move some rods out of the way and then step back there to deploy the rudder. Again, in all fairness, I could have done it back there at the dock, but I just wanted to show you some of the problems that you might encounter if you don't have a dock available to you, or the tide is out and the dock is too high to kind of get into the boat. I got another boat coming at me pretty fast, so I'm gonna have to hurry up and do this. All right, not incredibly difficult, as you can see, but it is something that I've got to do. And man, without a rudder, this thing just skates all over the place. If you don't have a rudder, get one. If you're thinking about this boat, man, I'm telling you what, rudder is pretty much a necessity. You don't necessarily have to do the same style I did, but put you a rudder on there, or this thing is just terrible to control. I'm going to do a speed test as soon as I get past this boat's wake. Okay, on speed 3, we are doing 2.4 miles an hour. Let's kick it up to speed 5. Okay, guys, on speed 5, I'm doing 3.6 miles an hour. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed the kayak to be much faster. The kayak feels faster, maybe because I'm sitting down closer to the water. But you're talking about 0.2 of a mile difference between the two. That doesn't mean a whole lot unless you're traveling a great distance, in which if you are, you're probably not using a kayak or a Bass Raider. So 3.6, very, very close to the kayak. I think the kayak was in at 3.8. So let's talk inventory. All right, guys, so starting at the bow, working my way to the stern. Obviously, I've got my motor. I have my battery meter down here mounted. It stays here all the time. I've also got I've got a forward-facing rod holder, actually a backward-facing rod holder. It faces me. I use that for putting my pole in there when I want to change out lures or take a fish off. I've got that mounted to the floorboard. Over here to the right, I've got my cup holder that I installed when I first got this boat, because the cup holders that are molded in are absolutely terrible. I've also got a gear track mounted here where I have my Garmin Striker 4. I just installed my Striker 4 for this boat yesterday. I've got two now. I've got one for my kayak and one for here, and I've got the transducer mounted to the bottom of the trolling motor, and it's working out pretty good so far. Obviously, this is within the first few minutes of testing, but I've got no electrical interference, and I've got some good readings on here. So it was working out pretty well. I was like, if you've got any questions about that, let me know. So continuing with the inventory, underneath the seat here, I've got a crate that's got all of my 3600 Plano boxes in it. And on the front of this crate, I've got a little caddy, a boat caddy attached, that I've got all my fish grips, my pliers, trying to again to bring along everything that I would have with my kayak and that I need for a day of fishing. And so the reason I put all my Plano boxes in here under the seat is because convenience for storage. I do have my box back here that I take on my kayak, and that's where I put all of my seldom used stuff that I store in the front hatch of my kayak. I've actually got that in my crate. So since we're talking about my crate, there it is. Well, I've got 5 rods, all stored horizontally. And then behind that, I have my 100 amp hour lithium battery, my flag and light pole that I may need. What else am I forgetting? Of course, we discussed the rudder already. And so the 3700 box that I've got in the seat of my kayak, I've got it stored here under this seat as well. All right, we are coming up on our first stop. I hope I haven't forgot anything. I do have my canteen here on the back of the seat, just like I do on my kayak. All right, guys, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about stability because I've already remarked numerous times just how stable this boat is. Up, down, no problem. Turn around, walk around, no problem. Incredibly stable, hands down. You're not going to get a kayak more stable than this. And they make some great, wide, beautiful kayaks that are very, very stable. Again, hard to beat 2 big old pontoons out here on your sides. Just kind of hard to beat that. So from an agility standpoint, we saw with the kayak that with the kayak having the motor and the rudder, the steerable rudder, you could sit there and just do 360s in the water. This is not quite as agile, but still agile. And one of the reasons that I didn't scoot a little bit further back is because now it becomes harder to swing out and make a tight turn. So you do want to be able to have a bit of a shorter shaft on the, or tiller, I'm sorry, on the motor, so that you can easily change directions if you need to, right? The further you get away from that pivot point, the harder it is, the more you have to swing out to make that happen. So from an agility standpoint, yes, the kayak is more agile, especially having the ability to steer with the back end or the front end, or both at the same time. Kayak is definitely more agile, but it's not as though this boat is cumbersome. It's just not as agile as a kayak. That's all I got to say about that. Let's get a lure in the water, guys. So I will say, having the Garmin mounted right here, and this is my first time using the Striker 4, does kind of interfere with exactly where I want to put my foot up on the side of the boat. I suppose I could mount it somewhere else. I suppose I could actually mount it down here on the floorboard, but I had this gear track already here, so I slid it into that gear track. But it is kind of exactly where I always want to put my foot, so I may have to look at doing something different there. So let's talk now a little bit about space. In the back, I definitely have a lot of space. And I will say, and this is kind of where I received most of my pushback when I was talking about space. One of the things, so I've got roughly 30 to 34 inches between me and the front of the boat. I can't remember exactly what it was when I measured it yesterday. But I have to kind of stay a little bit closer here to allow me, this is kind of my command center. This is where my battery meter's at. I've got my plug here, the trolling motor, the depth finder is up here. But I am positioned myself back from the boat, and I keep kicking things that are in the floorboard. I keep trying to tuck my wires down and away so that I stop stepping on them. I've already hit my leg on this here underneath the seat a couple of times, just trying to move around. So I do have the space. It just doesn't feel very friendly. I could put my foot up here on the side to do some casting, but with me being a lefty, I'm going to come back here and smack my rod. So this side of the boat is not really all that handy. Now, normally I would have my rod stored in a horizontal fashion using my Brocraft system, and that works out great, but it does eliminate one side of the boat for use, which is fine with two people. In fact, preferred with two people. So therefore, you're not going to hit one another when you're casting. But for a single person, for an individual, you kind of want that ability to move around. You certainly have that ability to go either side in the kayak. Here, it's a little bit more difficult. But I do have the space here in the back. In fact, I have plenty of space. And one thing I will say that is nice, in my kayak, I turn around to see what's behind me and I grab it. So I kind of turn like this right here. In a kayak, it's important to kind of keep your center of gravity. In this boat here, not so much. I'm able to do this. And this is very, very nice because now I can look through here, grab the rod that I want, so on and so forth. So that portion of it is very nice and very convenient. However, there are several kayaks on the market that also have 360 seats. So while it is an advantage of the Bass Raider over my current kayak, there are kayaks out there that also have 360 swivel seats and are wide enough to where you could put your foot up on the side and turn around to grab what you need. You have a little less elbow room depending on how big your tank well is. Again, I'm in one of the actually smaller of the kayaks, just at 10.5 feet. But it's very comparable to this, which is 10 feet 2 inches. But I do have the ability to turn around here and grab what I want and see without having to twist so much. And this goes back to what I was saying to you, that if you've got mobility issues, if you have back problems, if you don't get around quite as good as you used to, I do believe this is a better vessel for you. But with all that space back there, a lot of it's kind of wasted. I mean, what are you going to put back there that you're not going to have to move stuff out of your way to go back and get? And that's kind of the, that's kind of the thing. Yeah, you've got all this ton of space, but what good is it for? I forgot to mention I do have my catch board with me today, and I discovered something yesterday that was actually pretty cool. Advantage Bass Raider is that the width of this in here where your seat rails go, fits a 26-inch carbonite catchboard perfectly. So I love that aspect of it. Unfortunately, though, I cannot use this boat in my kayak tournament, so it's kind of a moot point. In fact, a lot of times when I'm on this boat, I don't bring the catchboard with me. Let's see what might be lurking up here by these logs. Well, based on that cast, I'd say nothing. This is an example right here of where the agility is a little less than desirable. Again, not bad, just not as good as I would want it to be. So I did have a couple people tell me, hey, you could put a casting deck on and so forth. And I do believe that if you were going to have this boat only for a solo, you never were going to take anyone with you or whatever, I do believe it would be advantageous to put some sort of a deck here on the back. Again, it's not going to be a huge deck. You're not going to gain a ton of storage spots because, again, you're less than 2 feet wide in here. But it would be advantageous to put some things up underneath. You're still going to need a place to store your rods that on the casting. So maybe you drill some holes into the deck back there, to put your rods down into, so that you don't necessarily maybe have to bring a crate per se. But it's not going to be tall enough to slide a milk crate underneath, unless you make it stick up above the deck there, and and it wouldn't really be a casting deck at that point in time. You would mostly just be building in like a riser that you could have storage underneath. I don't necessarily know what you gain from that, but you could do that. But the boat as it comes, and of course you're going to make modifications to it. A lot of things are kind of in your way. Just not the same as a kayak. In my kayak, everything's out of the way. In this boat, I've done my best to keep the things out of my way, but they're still there. I still have to be careful where I move my feet, and I kick my rod holder, or I get tangled up in these wires that are just kind of like laying here. There's no running the wires through the hull, unless you're going to cut a big old hole in your boat, which I would highly suggest that you don't. And so, look, not bad. It's not like I hate it. I don't. But the kayak is just better, in my opinion. It feels less cluttered. And that's a big thing for me. So if you're someone that isn't wired that way, to you it may feel like you're riding along in a big old coupe de ville. But for me, just things laying everywhere because there's no nook or cranny to put them in. There's no built-in storage. There's no hatches where you can hide things. Everything's just there above board, and just kind of in your sight and in your way. I keep bumping my Plano box here every time I turn this way. Big deal? No. Just aggravating. Just it messes with, I guess, my OCD. So if you're wired like that, and where you can't stand looking at wires, or you can't, then I think this boat is going to present a little bit of a challenge. You guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I always appreciate you watching, and I'm going to try to edit this down so you don't fall asleep watching it. Bass Raider is great. Kayak is great. Money for money, dollar for dollar, a $2,500 boat versus a $2,500 kayak. I think the kayak is better. I think it just offers more than the Bass Raider. But can you put a price on being able to take someone with you? I don't think so. And so that's pretty awesome as well. But from a solo vessel, you're going to use this solo, you're going to use a kayak, and you don't have mobility issues, I think you will find that the kayak is just designed for what we want to do. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate you. I think I just saw a bass jump over here. I'm going to go see if I can get him or not. Thanks again, man. Squirrel. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you watching. I always do. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, and share. Appreciate you all. We are this close to 800, and we're just going to keep on going. Got any comments, let me know. Those of you that commented last week, even those of you that took exception or disagreed with what I said, you did so in a very respectful manner. And I appreciate that, guys. So I'm going to get out of here and see if I can catch a couple fish before the heat comes in. Hey, look, no matter what you've got going on, guys, make sure you always take some time to get outside and play.